Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to build a very simple poll app in Django. So just to demonstrate how it works, I have questions that are available, so polls, and then I can vote on one. So for instance, what framework do you use? I can choose Flask, and then I can see the total results for each poll. And if I want, I can create a new poll. So what operating system do you use? And you can say Windows, Mac, and then Linux. Create this poll, and then I can vote on it, and I'll say Windows, and we see the results here. So this app is the one that we're going to build in this video. Now I'll have an article for this, so if you want to read the article as well, I'll post that in the description below, along with the code that I use in this video and the starting HTML files if you want to do this from scratch. Okay, to start, let me show you some of the files that I'm going to begin with. So I have a static style.css file here and a templates directory, and in it we have another directory called poll, and then we have some templates, and these are going to be used in Django, so they already have the template tags in the template here, so like the blocks, and let's see, yeah, the blocks here. For others, we have placeholders. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it kind of takes a while to set up all the HTML. So I want to skip over that part and I want to focus on the Django part. So we'll see these in the app momentarily, but just know that I'm starting with these. And if you go to the code that I include in the link in the description below, then you can get these same starting files. So to begin the project, first I need to create a virtual environment, and then I'll install Django. Next, I need to activate it so I can actually install Django. So then pip install Django, and we'll wait for that to install. Okay, so now that Django is installed, I can create a project. So Django admin start project. And it's really hard to name projects when they basically do one simple thing. So in this case, I'm creating a project for polls. And then the app that I will want is a poll. So I'll just call this poll project, and then inside of the app that I'm going to create, or inside the project, I'll create an app called poll. So I can cd into the poll project directory, and then I can go ahead and create that app named poll. So Python manage.py, and then start app, and we'll call this poll. Okay, so now that I have the poll app here, I'll go ahead and move the static directory and the templates directory into my poll directory. So I'll just take that and move it here, move, and then I'll do the same thing for templates. So if I can just take templates here and move it. Okay, so everything is in there. So next, what I want to do is, because I'll be working with the database, let me get everything set up so I don't have to worry about it. So what I'll do is Python manage.py and then migrate. So that would just migrate all the default stuff and create the database for me. So on the left hand side, we should see db.sqlite3 get created for us. So now let's take a closer look at the templates that we have. We have 5 templates. We have base, create, home, results, and vote. So what I want to do is I want to create a view that will render each one of these templates, except for base, of course, because it's my base template, so we can actually see everything. So if I go to views.py inside of my poll app, I can create the 4 views that I need. So one will be home, and it's going to take in requests. And what I can do is I can return render and then the name of the template. So it's going to be in the poll directory, and then the name of the template is home.html. So just to confirm that, open this and we see home.html, and I have to pass in requests first, and then I'll probably have a context, so I'll just pass that now, and I'll create an empty context for the template. And then basically I'll do the same thing for the others. So there are 4, so I'll create 3 more. The second one that I want is create, and it's going to be create.html. Next, I want, let's see, vote, and finally results. So votes and results. And these two are actually a little bit different because they can only work with a single poll. So home and create, they don't depend on the number of polls, whereas vote and results have to work with a single poll. So we need to pass in the specific poll that we're working with, and we'll have something called a poll ID eventually. Doesn't make sense now, but I'm just putting this here to make the URLs easier to work with. So when I come back, I don't have to add in the IDs in the URLs. So this should be enough to get started with our views. So now let's go back to the poll project and let's add the URLs. So what I'll do is I'll import them. So from poll.views import star. And actually, I will do this from poll import views. I think that would make the most sense. And then I want to say the empty path will be the index, and that's going to be home. So I'll say views dot home. You know, to make this a little more clear, I'll say poll views. So as poll views, just in case other apps get added. So poll views dot home, and then this is going to be called home, and should have a name here. So name equals home, and then I'll do the same thing for the other ones. So I have 3 additional ones. Next, I have the create. So I'll just do create. This should be create, and the name will be create, followed by vote. And this is going to take in a poll ID. So poll ID. And I'll add the trailing slash. This is going to be vote and vote here. And then finally, we have the results. So the results will be for a particular poll as well. So poll ID, and let's see, results. So this should be enough to get us started looking at our app. So let me go ahead and start the server. So manage.py run server. We don't have any errors. So let me go here and refresh. And we see template does not exist at poll home. So let's see where this went wrong. If I go back to views and let's see, poll. So we have the template directory here, and then we have the directory called poll, but for some reason it's not finding my templates. And that is because I made the simplest mistake you can make basically when you start a new Django project. And that's, I didn't add my app to the settings. So if I go to installed apps, I need to add poll here. So now my app should restart. And if I go back and refresh, I see the home page. And then if I go to the /create, I see the create page. Vote will take in some ID, so I'll just pass in 5. It doesn't really matter what the number is for now. And then finally, results. So this is what the pages look like. This is what I've built before. And if you look up here, you'll see that the links don't actually work. So I can fix those. If I go to my base template, since I have the URLs now, I can add the URL tags on the template. So for this one, the poll application, this will just take me home. So URL home. And then this will actually be used twice. So I'll just copy it and I'll paste it for the home here. And then create is going to be create. So now if I refresh the page, I can click on home, I can click on create, and then I can click on poll application and it takes me home. These links won't work yet because they're specific to certain IDs. So I'll handle those a little bit later. Next, what I want to do is I want to create the model that we'll be working with for this project. So I really only need one model for this. I could make it more complicated and have multiple models so each poll can have any number of options, but to keep it simple, I'm going to have each poll have 3 options only. So I'll go to models here and I'll create a new class called poll. So this is going to be the poll model, of course. It's going to inherit from models.model, and it's going to have a few fields. So first we'll have the question field, and then we'll have each option. So we'll say option 1, option 2, and option 3, followed by the actual counts for each of those options. So every time someone votes for an option, we need to store that. So I'll say option 1 counts, option 2 counts, and option 3 counts. And now let's just set the fields. So for the question, I'll have this be, let's say, a text field. The next three will be character fields. So character field, char field, and then we'll say max length is going to be 30. It should have an underscore. And this will be the same for all three. And finally, the counts will be integers. So integer field, and then they need defaults of 0 because we want to start at 0 for each one. And then as people vote for the options, we'll increment it by 1 each time. So this is our model. Let me go ahead and stop the app, and then we can make the migration for this. So make migrations, and then we can migrate. So now we should have this in our database. And if I quickly open up my database, DB SQLite, and just do schema, we see the Django tables in there that were created by default. And then we have poll_poll, which is the one that we just created. So let me exit out of this. And that should be it for our model because it's really simple. So I'll close that file, and I'll close the settings as well. And I think the URLs, I think we're done with that as well. So the first one of our views that we actually want to work on is create. So if I go back to create here in the app, and I have to actually start up the server again. So run server. What I want to do is I want to be able to enter a poll question. So what language do you use? And then 3 options, and then I can submit that, and that question will be created in the database. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create a form for this. And since it maps pretty closely with my model, I can create a model form. So what I'll do is I'll create a new file called forms.py, and in it, I'll create that model form. So it did not create forms.py where I want it. So I'll move this to poll. I'll move forms.py to poll/forms.py. And then I'll open it, and we'll say from Django.forms import model form. And I'll also have to import the actual model. So I'll say from .models import poll, so I can actually use it in the form. And the form itself is pretty easy because it's a model form. So class, we'll call this poll form, or create poll form to be specific. And this is going to be a model form, which I just imported. Then I need to define the meta, which will take in, or which will allow us to set the model, which is poll, and then the fields that are used. So I can pass in a list or a tuple, and I need to pass in question, and then the fields that I want to appear. So option 1, option 2, and option 3. Next, we can bring this form into our view. So let's say from .forms import create poll form, and I can also bring in the model because I'll need that eventually. So I'll import poll, and inside of create, what I can do is I can instantiate that form. So form equals create poll form, just like that, and I can pass it to the context. So form is going to be form. Let me put this on a new line. I don't think I'll need anything else, but this looks a little bit better. So I have the form here, and I'm instantiating it. So I'm passing it to the context next, and then that goes to the template. So let's open up the template for create.html. And what I want to do is I want to add that form in here so it replaces the placeholders that I have in the template already. And before I do that, I want to install another library. So this is called Django widget tweaks. So pip install Django-widget-tweaks. And this will just make it easy for us to add classes to our widget when we put it in the HTML, because by default it's going to be just plain HTML and it's not going to look right when we put it in there. So now that I have that installed, I can go to my settings and just add widget tweaks. So widget tweaks, and I'll show you how this is used. So if we go back to our template up here at the top, what I need to do is I need to load in the particular library that I just installed. So I'll do that under the extends. So load widget tweaks. And then this will give us access to basically a function called a render field. So I'll show you it here first. So this is the input that we have right now. And then I'll say render field. So this comes from Django widget tweaks. It's not part of Django natively. And I'll pass in form.option1. So let's save that. And then if I start up the server, and let's see, it's no module named poll.model. Let's see where I messed that up. In views, line 4. Oh, this is models, not just model. Okay, so if I go back here and refresh, we see I have this new field here, but it doesn't look the same as the one above it because the CSS styles are different. So what I want to do is I want to add the CSS styles onto the one that I just created so it looks the same. So to do that, if I go back to create, I just need to look at what I'm missing. So basically I'm missing a class and a placeholder. I don't really care about the placeholder, so it's more about the class. So if I just do class equals form control, what widget tweaks is going to do is it's going to apply that class to form control. So if I refresh, now we see they look the same, except the placeholder is different, but the rest of it looks the same. And I don't know why Django doesn't include this directly because it's such a useful feature, but we have to install something for that. So if I can delete that, then we'll see the first one goes away and we're left with the option that we want. So I'll just do this for the rest of them. So I'll replace option 2. And I'll also replace option 3. So this is option 3. This is option 2. And then I also have the question. So this text area will get changed to question. And the class is still the same, form control. So let's leave that just to compare it. And we see this one's a bit bigger, but well, we can do this as well. So rows equals 3. And now they're both the same size, and I can delete the first one. Okay, so all of that should be working for my form. Of course, when I go to submit it, nothing happens except for it telling me that these fields are required, but nothing actually happens with the form. So even if I put something in here and hit submit, it gives me this error because it's trying to submit the form, but I haven't finished doing all the form stuff. So this stuff here is talking about the Crosssite request forgery token, and I can add that pretty easily. So let me just go underneath where I have the form field, and I'll pass in the Crosssite request forgery token. But still, that won't allow me to do anything because I have to handle it in the form. So basically, submitting the form means I'm using a post request. So I can add that in now. So if request.method is equal to post, what I want to do is I want to instantiate the form, but this time I want to pass in the actual post data. So I'll instantiate it with request.post. And then in the other case where it's a GET request, I'll just use what I have before. So it instantiates it with nothing. And to test things out, what I'll do is I'll print out the question. So form.question, so we can see what it looks like when I submit the form. So I'll refresh the page, or actually just go back to the URL. I'll type in these random characters so we can see. Hit submit, and we see create poll form has no object or attribute question. And that's because I need to kind of validate the data first. So if form is valid, what I can do is I can print out the clean data. So form clean data, which is just the data after it's been validated. And now let's take a look and see if I can do this. So say my question, and then for these I'll just put random text. And if we go back to the console, we see my question. So all of that is working as expected. So to finish this, I just need to save the form when it's valid. So I can do form.save, and then I can redirect the user to wherever would be appropriate. So I need to import the redirect function, and I can redirect the user to, let's say, home. So redirect home, and this should be return. So now that I have the save, it should save it to the database. So I'll put in a real question this time. So what framework do you use? And I can say Django, I can say Flask, I can say Pyramid here. So I'll hit submit, and we see it returns me to the home page. So this should mean that it's saved the data to the database. So let's go ahead and take a look in the database. So SQLite 3, DB SQLite, and I'll select star from poll. And we see what framework do you use, and then Django, Flask, Pyramid, and then we see 3 zeros to represent the fact that nothing has been voted on yet. So before we work on this page, what I want to do is I want to create a couple of more, and I need to start my server. I want to create a couple more questions so we can see it when we actually go to put them on the home page. So let's say, what language did you learn first? We'll say Python, JavaScript, or C. And I'll create one more. Do you like using Django? We have the question mark. Yes, no, maybe. All right, and I'll submit that. Okay, so now that I have some questions in the database, let's work on viewing them here under available polls. So this is pretty easy to do. If we go to the home view, what I need to do is I need to take the poll model that I'm importing and do objects.all. So this will give me all the polls that I have in the database, and I'll just call this polls, and I can pass it to the template. So polls and then polls like that. And then let's just add some space again. And then inside the home template, what I can do, so home, what I can do is I can loop over one of the placeholders that I have. So the placeholder starts from this list item to the end of the list item. So for, let's say, poll in polls, and then I can put the in4 down here. And then I can just update everything with the correct fields from the database. So for instance, which language is easier to learn? That's the placeholder. The actual value will be poll.question. And just to view this, if I go back and refresh, now we see the questions that I added along with the last placeholder that I have. So this one here is a placeholder, but the first 3 are actually in the database. So I can update these links as well. So for vote, this is going to be URL and then votes, and I need to pass in the poll ID. And then it's basically the same for results. The only difference is instead of vote, I have results. So if I go back and refresh the page, if I click on vote, I see the vote page. It still has the placeholder, of course, but it takes me there. And the same thing for results, it still has a placeholder, but at least all the links work. And then the last one here doesn't actually work because this is a placeholder. So I can just remove this and then refresh. And now I only have results or polls from the database here. So now let's work on the vote page because this is a little more complicated than the view results, not by much. So let's go to vote, and this is what I want to work on. So we already have the ID being passed in because I have IDs in the database now. So if I go back to vote, I'll just pick one. And the first thing I need to do is I need to update this with the question. So if I go to views and then vote, I'll need to query for the particular poll that I'm being, for the ID that I'm being passed in. So I'll say poll equals poll.objects.get, and then the primary key is going to be poll ID. And I'll pass that poll to the context. So poll and then poll, just like that. And if I open up the, let's see, vote, I can go to where the placeholder is. So which language is easier to learn? That's the placeholder. And I can update it with poll.question. So let's take a look and see if we can see that. So for number 1, this is what framework. For number 3, this is do you like Django, and so on. So now I need to update the options, and this will be similar. So there are a couple of ways of approaching this. We can create another Django form to handle this, but this is so simple that I'll just create the form myself and I'll handle it directly. But if we had something more complicated, you may want to consider creating a Django form for it. So I have the 3 placeholders here. So these need to be updated. So this will be poll option 1. And it's basically the same for the other 2, except 1 will be 2 and 1 will be 3. Okay, so if I go back and I refresh, I see Python, JavaScript, C. That's kind of a coincidence how we saw it there, but we see with do you like using Django, we have yes, no, and maybe. And then with framework, Django, Flask, Pyramid. Okay, so now I want to be able to submit this and view the results. So first thing I need to do is I need to add the Crosssite request forgery token. And I should be able to submit this. I don't need this hidden field here. So let's see if I have everything. Okay, so now if I go back to vote, what I want to do is I want to add that if statement. So if request method equals post, I want to check if it's a post request. And if it is a post request, I'll just print out requests and then post and then the actual value. So let's see. This is called poll. So request, post, and then not name, but poll. And I just want to see this working. So I'll go back, refresh, and something crashed. So invalid syntax. This should have 2 equal signs. And I'll submit Flask, hit submit. Nothing happens, but the check goes away, and we see option 2. So we know that's working. Pyramid, I see option 3, and then Django should be option 1. And that's exactly what I see. So I want to save these to the database, and to save those, I need to check and see which option I got first, and then I can update the database. So I'll just have if statements and else if. So if, and let's call this, we can call it selected option. And then we can say if selected option is equal to option 1, we'll do one thing. If it's option 2, we'll do another. Option 3. And then we'll have an else. So for else, we'll return HTTP response 400, and we'll say invalid form. And I need to import that. So from Django.http import HTTP response, just like that. And then for the rest, I need to update the data in the database. So I'll take the poll that I have, and for this one, I'll say poll dot option 1 counts. We're going to increment it by 1, and we'll do the same for the other 2. And this will be option 3 and option 2. So once we've done all of that, what I want to do now is I want to simply save the result. So poll.save, and then I'll redirect the user to, let's say, the results page. So return redirect results. And I need to pass in the poll ID, so poll.id, because the results are specific to one particular poll. So everything should be working now. Let's try it out. Let's refresh this one. And I'll vote for Django. And it takes me to the results page. So presumably it's saved correctly. I'll go back to vote, and I'll vote for Django again. And then I'll go back and I'll vote for it one more time. And then I'll go and I'll vote and I'll select pyramid once. So if we go to our database, what I can do is that SQLite query. So I think I already have it. So now if we look here for number 1, we see what framework do you use? Django, Flask, Pyramid, and we see 3 because I voted for Django 3 times, 0 for Flask, and 1 for Pyramid. So we have the vote page working correctly. So now we need to work on the final page, the result page. So this one should be pretty easy to do. We just need to add the values in, and then we need the total. So if we go to results, I need to query for the particular poll in question. So poll objects get, and then the primary key is going to be the poll ID again. And I can pass this to the context, and that will go to the template. So poll is going to be poll. And then inside of the template itself, I can just update the values. So this will be the question. So poll.question. And then I have to put in the options. So option 1. And then I'll do the same thing for the other two. So I'm just removing the placeholders and using the actual values. So option 3, option 2. And then if I scroll over a little bit, I have the actual vote numbers. So this will be option 1 count, because that's what we named it in the database. And then I can just update the other two. And this will be option 3. And this will be option 2. Okay, so let's take a look at this now. And I need to start my server again. I always forget to do that. So server started. So now we see 3, 0, and 1. So if I go back home and then vote for Flask this time, we should see 3, 1, 1. So now we need the total. We see total is 10, but that's not the actual total. So the easiest way to do this would be to have a total field on the model. So if I go to models.py, I can add a method. So we'll call this total, and it will take in self. And now just return the sum of the 3. So return self option 1 count plus option 2 count plus option 3 count. And we can do this because these are just integers. So now we'll have that field available. So if I go back to results, I can just replace this with poll.total. And now if I go, I see 5. So 3 plus 1 plus 1 is 5. If I vote again, I'll vote for pyramid. We see pyramid has 2 now, and the total is 6. So we have the results page working, and that means we have everything else working. So I can vote for other polls, and they all work. All the links work, and I can go directly to the results if I want to skip over voting. So that's it for this video. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll definitely take a look at them. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.